Good day, Tetentel here. For starting in 3.19 Kalandra League, I wanted to highlight few Spell Totem builds that I find the strongest and the most satisfying to play with. For every build I created a detailed PoB with step-by-step skill tree progression, gems used while leveling, and useful notes with answers to some popular questions. All the builds are 100% solo self-found or hardcore viable, because in any of them I didn't use a single unique item. All the gear mostly has tier 2 or lower modifiers, and I made sure that the damage will be on a good level, so you could easily farm high tier maps and bosses. Defenses are also solid in every build, 100% suppression, determination, endurance shards, and most importantly, tanky decoy totems to taunt everything on the screen. In Sentinel and FHE I managed to complete 30 waves of Simulacrum only because decoy totems were tanking everything, even bosses. By the way, in Kalandra League, decoy totems receive another buff, around 20% more life, so they become even stronger defensive layer. Two of the builds are updated versions of builds I showed previously, Storm Burst and Lightning, and another two builds will be new, Spark and Creeping Frost Totems. I started Sentinel League with Spark Totems, and that was a really enjoyable experience. 4 Spark Totems quickly fill the whole screen with projectiles that just melt everything. Especially it feels amazing when Eldritch Altar spawns. You click on it and all the period monsters immediately get destroyed with previously spawned Spark projectiles. But also Spark is pretty reliant on the map layout. You really need to have some walls around so that Spark projectiles can bounce off of them and shotgun monsters much more efficiently. And it seems like the new League mechanic in Kalandra expansion is very good in that regard. In pretty much all the clips we saw from Lake of Kalandra zone, it was a lot of edges everywhere, which also count as walls, so Spark can bounce from them. So I think that Spark Totem's build suits the most for League starting in Kalandra. Like I said, in Path of Building link you can find a lot of useful information. Here we have leveling skill trees. Leveling gems are shown here. We switch to Spark Totems at level 31 after we complete first labyrinth, and library quests in Act 3, so that pierce and faster projectile support would be available. Make sure to also check out the notes section of the PoB. Here I try to explain the basics of the builds, how we scale damage, what the playstyle looks like, and other things like what to do in case you don't want to use mines. So Spark Totems, it seems like they will be good for new League mechanic, and they're god tier for clearing indoor tight maps. The second build will be Storm Burst Totems. I wanted to show that build right after Spark because the skill tree for Storm Burst is almost identical to Spark. This is because both Spark and Storm Burst scale really well with skill effect duration. So on both builds I took both duration clusters on tree, so there's not much room for allocating points somewhere else. And I think that's good that two builds have identical trees, because if for some reason you didn't like one of the builds, you can always try another without even spending regret orbs on reroll. GGD announced that Arch-Nemesis array monsters will become even more powerful, so even more than before you want to have good single target DPS even in maps and not just for pinnacle boss farming. And out of all Spell Totem builds, I think Storm Burst has the best single target DPS. Looking at Path of Building, we can see the same tree as in Spark builds. Leveling is slightly different though, because we don't use dual wield nodes early on like for Spark. There's leveling skill and support gems in skill section. I want to emphasize that we start using Divine Blessing Wrath Aura only after Uberlap, because from Ascendancy we get 50% less mana cost of skills, which also affects initially huge mana cost of Divine Blessing. Here in the notes section I described how exactly Storm Burst works and its duration thresholds. There are also tips here for leveling, playstyle, endurance charge generation and so on. Storm Burst Totems is my go-to build for gauntlet races, and I'm really confident in this build as a League starter. Let's move on to the next build, Creeping Frost Totems. I tried them for the first time in Sentinel League because I heard that when using GMP, all the extra projectiles from Creeping Frost can shotgun and as a result do good single target damage. And initially I really hated the builds as these projectile overlaps felt very inconsistent. But then I was suggested to try Greater Volley support instead of GMP, and that was a game changer. With Greater Volley, all the projectiles indeed shotgun the same monster all the time, and most importantly, they can do so from any distance. That means that I didn't need to constantly resummon my totems every time the boss would move a little bit. Here you can see how I was testing the amount of overlaps with different supports. I made it so that the spell had 100% chance to poison, and I used Golden Rule unique jewel that reflects poisons back to my character. So with the 0 increased terror effect, 7 projectiles can constantly shotgun from any distance. With 30% area effect, even 11 projectiles can shotgun thanks to Greater Volley support. And since then, Creeping Frost Totems became my favorite skill. It is in my opinion the smoothest build out of all the cold skills on totems. It feels really good on maps, and unlike Spark and Stone Burst, it can chill and freeze and shatter monsters. There's also a very easy source of freeze proliferation now on gloves and implicit from Eldritch Embers that allows to even freeze rare monsters on maps. Just like in other builds, in PoB you can find leveling trees at the bottom, useful tips in the notes section, and all the gem used in the skill section. This build suits the most of those who doesn't want to press too many buttons, because unlike in other builds, I didn't use Mines here or Sigil of Power, so the only skill to use in addition to totems is self-casting Curse. Even in this build, it is possible to implement Divine Blessing Aura. We can't use Life Tap support anymore for that, but this build tree is right next to Eldritch Battery Keystone, so we can sacrifice some armor and life in order to get another offensive aura on demand. To see the EB version of PoB, you need to switch the skill tree to EB, change skill sets to EB set here, and swap the gear set to EB as well. Also, the Rain of Splinters unique jewel can add even more damage to the build. But I didn't include that in the default version of the build, since I wanted to not use any unique items to make builds more SSF friendly. And the damage is completely fine even without the jewel. And the last build I wanted to update for new league is Ball Lightning Totems. With Ball Lightning in SSF HC Sentinel League, I managed to kill Feared and fully complete Simulacrum for the first time in my life, so the build is proven to be able to complete some of the hardest PvE challenges. And at the same time I think this build is the best for mapping all around. Spark Totems would be faster in indoor maps, but Ball Lightning is not reliant on any factors like that. Some people tend to think that Ball Lightning Totems require a Rain of Splinters unique for the build to be viable for mapping, but that's not the case. As you can see, I don't use Rain of Splinters here for extra projectiles, and the clearing is just fine. Again, the path of building, you can find all the information you need for leveling the builds. Leveling trees and gems here, and I will remind one more time to check out the notes section as well, you might find something useful for you there. In the future, I plan to keep adding more information to notes in PoB. For example, after answering some question about the build from YouTube comments or from Twitch chat, I'm just gonna copy paste it there, so this way we can together collect a nice FAQ for the build. The links to all the PoBs mentioned in the video you can find in the video description. Every time before the start of the league I theory craft even more totem builds, but for most of them I don't make such detailed PoBs as it takes quite a bit of time. But you can still check out the rest of the builds in these Google Docs spreadsheets, the link also gonna be in the description. I will play one of these builds at the Kalandra League starts. Honestly, still can't even choose what to play, every build is really tempting in its own way. And as always, I will be streaming that on Twitch, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the Twitch chat, link is gonna be in the description, or leave them in the comments below. And that's it for today, I'm Tatiantel, and I wish you the best of luck.